Yeah? Public. Okay. Bezrat Hashem. So this is the last of this book.
Yep.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are back again in the Alshech Academy here in Tzfat, where we do the weekly portion in the holy book Torah Moshe of Moshe Alshech. And we are in Parasha Beshalach, where today Moshe will take us through the entire episode of the journey of the Jews out of Egypt and then heading towards the Yam Suf and the Paro's decision to pursue them and all of the lines in between. So Bezrat Hashem Noseh V'Natzliach, may we merit to connect to the soul of the holy Moshe Alshech and learn the Torah that he's teaching us. So the pasuk starts off, Vayhi Beshalach Paro et ha'am. It was when Paro saw off the Jewish people, V'lo nacham Elohim, and Hashem didn't lead them, Derech Eretz Pelishtim, through the land of Pelishtim, Ki karovhu, because Pelishtim is close, Ki amar Elohim, because God said, Peni lachem ha'am, may the people reconsider, Mirotam Milchama, when they see a war, V'shavu Mitzrayim, and they'll return to Egypt. So the questions Ramosha is going to take us through are as follows. Ra'ui lasim lev, we need to pay attention to the word Vayihi. As we know, Vayihi always means a lashon of tsar, it's expressing sorrow. And the Midrash, actually, the beginning of the parasha says, Mi amar Vai. Vayihi is like Vai. Oy Vai. Who said Vai? So we have to understand what is this exclamation of sadness and exclamation of sorrow that is being expressed with the Vayihi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Number 2, Omro et ha'am. We see a different word, different description describing the Jewish people from the beginning of the parasha to later on, where it says, in the beginning, Vayi Beshalach Paro et ha'am, Paro sent the Am, the nation, and later on it says Bnei Israel. So why do we have a change of description of the phrase of how we're referring to the Jews? One place Ha'am and the other place Bnei Israel. Number 3, Amrov V'lo nacham. The pasuk says Vayihi Beshalach Paro et ha'am. It was when Paro sent the Jewish people, and it doesn't say anything to describe what happened then. It just says it was then. And then it says, V'lo nacham Elokim, another thing that happened was that Hashem didn't lead them. So the fact that there's a vav there, it seems to be saying another statement, besides what it was already introduced with the first line, which was Vayi B'shalach Paro et ha'am. But that's obviously seemingly you can't say that because he didn't say anything. So the simple understanding would be that when Paro sent the people out of Mitzrayim, Hashem didn't lead them through Pelishtim. But then we have to understand why it says V'lo nacham, which seems to describe a new piece of information being given over. And another question is, Amro, number 4, Vayasev. Vayasev, Hashem led them in a roundabout way. Lama yode'eni me'ata she'esibam le'yam suf. Ki zot hayta kavana shelo nacham Elokim derech eretz Pelishtim. Right, so it says, besides the fact, this is already going into the next pasuk. So the pasuk says, why did we not go through the Pelishtim? Because of the fact that a war might break out, and the Jews will feel too close to Mitzrayim, and they'll just head back. And the next pasuk starts off, Vayasev Elokim. Where did God take the Jewish people? Through the desert to the Yam Suf. So this seems to be another reason that the Jewish people didn't go through Pelishtim, because Hashem wanted to take them to the Yam Suf. As we're going to see, the majority of this week's parasha talks about the events that transpired at the Yam Suf. So, says Ramosha, why doesn't the Torah say V'gam? Another reason, an additional reason why he didn't take us through Pelishtim is because he wants to go to the Yam Suf. that it seems that the Torah is not referring to it as a second reason, and at the same time it's referring to it as another reason, so we have to understand what is this additional piece of information telling us. Number 5, Amrov Chamushim Alu B'nai Israel, the Jews left Egypt with weapons. Now the question is, why does the Torah tell us here? How is this relevant to the fact that it's that left Egypt? And another thing, really the question, I'm assuming this is really what Moshe means by this question, is why does the Torah mention the fact that they carried weapons now? Why doesn't it mention it earlier on when it actually describes them leaving? In last week's parasha, it describes the Jewish people leaving with all of their hosts of people, of animals, of children. Why is this specifically introduced here when we're describing the events leading up to the splitting of the sea? Number 6 says Moshe, Amro she'im hayu rakeh halivav. If the Torah is referring to the Jewish people as soft and fearful people with no braveness, that they would just return to Egypt at the first sight of war, then why does it say that they left with weapons? What people carrying weapons seems to be that they're ready for a fight, not that they're just gonna run away and head back to their slavery in Egypt. V'gam, says Ramosha, we know there's another explanation from the Midrash what the word chamushim means. And the Midrash says that the chamushim means that only a fifth of the people left, or only a 50th. And as we know, the Midrash even adds another ratio, only 1 in 500. So it's either 20%, 2%, or 0.2% of the people that left. So now Ramosh is asking us the same question here. Why is this information mentioned here specifically regarding these events, describing what led up to the chase of Paro up to the Yam Suf? Lama yodi'enu po tzeitam echad mechamishim or chad mechamisha. Why is the Torah choosing to say this here in this word v'chamushim? Ki im b'makom shesipur ha'yetziah haya ra'ui. It should have been, this information should have been relayed to us earlier on, but Parashat Bo'el Paro, which is the earlier parasha last week, where we described the Jews leaving Egypt. The shehu po bilti mekushar. It seems out of place here, out of context, to be mentioned here. It seems to be like a random bit of information that isn't helping the narrative of the general narrative of the story. Number 7, Amro vayikach Moshe. And the pasuk describes Moshe as the one carrying the bones of Joseph. Ki en mekomo po, says another question. Why is that mentioned here? This is another thing that should have been mentioned when the Jews left Egypt. Ki im lemala. The Parasha HaKodemet, they should have said, mentioned the previous parasha, Ba'askir Nasiya b'Mitzrayim. V'lo po, ashu achar yotam b'Sukkot. This is already a few days into the journey. They're already in Sukkot, in the middle of the desert. Uma gam, says Ramosha, I've got a perfect place where we can throw it in, and it will have very relevant positioning there, according to the Midrash, and it's also a Gemara in Sota, where it says that the Shekol Yisrael hayu asukim bekesef v'zahav. The entire Jewish nation were busy loading themselves up with gold and silver from their neighbors. Moshe ba'atzmot Yosef. Moshe wasn't interested in all of the riches. He instead was carrying out the mitzvah of sorting out Yosef's bones. And the pasuk in Mishlei that says, Chacham lev yikach mitzvot, those who have a wise heart take mitzvot, choose mitzvot over other things, is given to Moshe, to referring to Moshe at that time. So it says Moshe Alshech, im kem ba'omrova yishalu b'Mitzrayim. If, according to the Midrash, according to the Gemara, that was the time that Moshe actually put the effort in and busied himself with the task of taking Yosef out of Mitzrayim, then it should have been mentioned while the Torah describes the rest of the Jewish people asking for all the gold and silver and garments. And there it should have said, Hayal Lomar u'Moshe lakach et atzmot Yosef. Moshe, on the other hand, was the one taking the bones of Joseph. So we have two bits of information that we want to understand how that's going to help us understand the narrative here, even though they seem to be related to the actual Exodus per se, not really to the events leading up to the splitting of the sea. And Rav Moshe is going to tell us how they explain the narrative here. Number 8, Amro imo shehum yutar. It says Moshe took the bones of Joseph, imo, with him. What does that mean, with him? He took it. This is actually where we learn a very interesting halacha, that a dead body is allowed to be in the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount has its holiness equivalent to the Levite camp in the Mishkan. And we learn from here that Moshe carried Joseph's body and bones with him in his camp, which is called the Levite, right? There's the camp of the Mishkan, the Machne Kedusha. Then there's the Machne Leviah, which is equivalent to the Temple Mount. And then there's the Machne Israel, which was the general Jewish population, which is equivalent to Jerusalem, around the Temple Mount. So this is actually a very interesting word that the rabbis use to learn this halacha from. But Rav Moshe is telling us that we see from here that this word needs explaining, why we're specifically talking about Moshe taking it close to him and with him. Another question Rav Moshe says is, why did, when we describe the oath, the serious oath that Yosef gave his brothers and his children and nephews when he died, he said hashbeah hishbiah. He promised them. He made them really a double oath. And as we know, the word for pakod yifkod is a double use of the word remembrance, that God is going to remember us. So what is this double use of the oath and the remembrance? Number 10 asks Rav Moshe, Amro pakod yifkod v'yada yomar ki hashbeah hishbiah et bnei Israel lahalot etzvotav mizeh. So obviously when Yosef told the Jewish people that they should take his bones up, he mentioned in his statement, pakod yifkod, one day God will remember you in exile and he'll take you out. And then when he takes you out, when he's pakod yifkod you, take my bones with. But that isn't relevant for us right now, because right now we are in the time that we're being redeemed. So all we need to reference when we describe Moshe taking the bones is saying, why did Moshe take Yosef's bones? Because Yosef made the Jewish people swear solemnly that they're going to take his bones out. Why do we need to mention the pakod yifkod aspect, which was relevant up until the Exodus, and now post-Exodus it seems to be irrelevant to the story of Moshe taking the bones. V'gam omro leimor. It says, hashbeah hishbiah, he made them promise, leimor, saying the following. And as Rav Moshe, we know Rav Moshe always asks what leimor means in every context. Usually leimor, we know, means to say to others. What was here, what were they saying over? It seems to be, this is the statement Yosef said to them, and that was it. So those are the 10 questions of today's parasha so far. And we're going to go into it Bezrat Hashem. So now we need to understand the famous question, which really is the question of why did the Jewish people leave Egypt out of this long roundabout way? It's literally, it won't even be one of the routes and ways. You know, when you put in Google Maps, you want to go somewhere, there'll be like 3 different routes. You know, no tolls, yes tolls, other road. This wouldn't even be one of the 4 options because it's such a roundabout way. So what we need to really understand, what was the benefit of this journey? So Moshe says as follows: Omnam hinei b'tchilat sipurei hamasaot. Before we begin the entire story of the Jewish people in the desert, achar yotam Sukkot, once they've arrived to the first stop, which is Sukkot, Yiterem yedaber. Before we go into all the details and the stories that transpired in the desert, so meaning if somebody sees from the outside, watching the events unfold, and sees that the Jewish people are being taken by Hashem on this roundabout journey, they might begin to have negative thoughts or non-respectful thoughts towards Hashem, disrespectful thoughts towards the way Hashem is treating the Jewish people. And he'll say as follows: what would be the thoughts that one might have? One might think, Birot ki al-yedei nesoya Israel derech hamidbar Yam Suf. As we're going to see in the next 3 or 4 books of the Torah, all of the events that happened in the desert, because they didn't go through the simple way, which would have been a no-brainer to just go straight up north to Israel. And because they took this entire long journey, Mitza'um ra'ot rabot, they had very long, difficult years in the desert. Vayit akvu sham arba'im shana b'midbar. Eventually this led to them being kept in the desert for 40 long years. Haloit chametz levavo lemor, one might have been filled with bitterness and complaint towards Hashem and say, Tachat me'asa Hashem kacha. For what reason, why on earth would Hashem do this? V'lo halicham derech eretz pelishtim ki karovu. You have a nation that has been enslaved for many years, and finally you're taking them out, and you're going to give them a land that you promised them. Just take them in. What's the point of going through all of this further suffering, which eventually turns into a complete nightmare? Instead of taking them through the quick way, just a few days would pass for him, Be'eretz Israel, they would already be in the Holy Land. One might come up with 3 different theories of why the Jewish people had to take this long way. Number 1, says Ramosha, the first theory might be as follows. Why did Hashem do this? That the Jews should not be looking like a thief that is escaping the crime scene that he's running away from. Once if the Egyptians and Paro will see that they're heading straight to another civilization, the closest nearby country, which is the land of Pelishtim, or the land of Israel through the land of Pelishtim, they would see miyad yakiru ki lo yashuvu od. This would be an instant giveaway that their promise that they're going to come back after a 3-day journey in the desert was a hoax, and they never really meant it. So why does Hashem have to take us through the desert? Because we have to put up a front to keep Paro guessing of where we're heading and whether we plan to come back. In order to keep him on his toes, to keep him believing that we're still true to our promise, that we said that we're going to travel 3 days into the desert and do a slaughtering party. So therefore, we didn't want Paro to actually get wind of the fact that we're not planning to come back, and that would be a reason to head into the desert, not straight up north to Eretz Israel. That's number 1. Number 2, this would be a similar reason, but here we're not referring to Paro trying to get his slaves back, but rather Machmat HaMitzriyim Shehish Ilum. We know that the Egyptians lent the Jews all of their expensive vessels and fancy clothes. Kiburotam holchim derech Eretz Israel. If they will see the Jews heading straight up to Israel, yirdefu kemarei nefesh achreim. They will instantly run after them to get their items back. Mitzarat libam. Ish al klei kaspo v'zahavo. Everybody wants his jewelry back. They want their nice gold and silver goblets and bowls, and their finest fancy dresses. Umachmadem atovim. They won't wait too long to see the Jews getting far away. The second they get the idea that the original claim of taking 3 days out in the desert is not happening, they will instantly take chase to get their stuff back. So this is similar to the first reason. Both the Mitzrim and Paro will chase them. Number 3, a third reason might be why Hashem takes them to the desert. It's not because of the desert, it's because Hashem wants to take the Egyptians, lead them where? Lead them to the Yam Suf. Why was it important for Hashem to lead the Egyptians into a trap, to throw them into the Red Sea? This was in order to take revenge on the fact that the Egyptians threw the babies into the river. And as we know, Hashem always exacts punishment midah keneged midah. The way Hashem gives a like for like punishment. So this would be a third theory why Hashem had to, so to speak, take the Jews into the desert towards the Red Sea, so that he can punish Mitzrayim there. Says Rav Moshe, if these are the real reasons that the Jews took the desert journey, Halo Haita Tlunat Israel al Hashem Chalila. This would be a cause for the Jewish people to really have bitter claims and complaints against Hashem. But Omram ki al tova mu'etet, for this relatively small gain, hevi aleim ra'a gdola. The Jews don't really care that much if the Egyptians get their punishment by being drowned in the sea. Okay, I can live with the fact that the Egyptians didn't all die and get drowned in the Yam Suf. And what else? I can also don't mind that you don't get that you'll come and take back their gold and silver. I'll be fine without it. The main thing is the main thing is that they don't die. Because eventually all of these people died. Staying in the desert for 40 years before they can go into the land. So now we're saying what reason is still valid, somewhat, is the reason that Paro, because he was originally told the Jews are going to leave only 3 days, and now he's going to see that they're heading straight to civilization, not to the desert, he'll run after them. But now the Jews are going to have an even deeper complaint. They're going to ask, why on earth did you tell him 3 days to begin with? This is like a very strong question, really, that anybody can have on this entire story, right? As Rav Moshe says as follows: Lama amarta derech shloshet yamim sheyachshavu shenashuv. Why do you have to fool them into thinking that we're going to come back? Sha'ali day came, which now caused us halachnu me'ra'al ra'al arba'im shana b'mil, which caused us to have to go in the desert for 40 years. Ki'alo en machzor Hashem lo tziyam. Hashem didn't have an issue to take them out of Egypt without fooling Paro. He didn't have to fool them. Right? Because we know Hashem ultimately took them out with great wonders and plagues. And Paro eventually had to submit to Hashem's will. That was regardless if there was only 3 days or not. So now the Jews were questioning the entire method, the entire approach of why we're now going to be relegated to be 40 years in the midbar and die, and only our children will go in 40 years, all because of this stupid plan of trying to fool Paro. So Al-Ken says Rav Moshe, that's why these psukim here now are going to come and tell us not to be fooled, not to think that these 3 reasons are the real reason why the Jewish people didn't go straight into Israel. To remove anybody's mistaken thoughts against Hashem's ways. Beshalach, which is why we're going to start the pasuk to describe and explain the itinerary and the path the Jews took out of Egypt. So now Rav Moshe is explaining, what does it mean, Vayehi? Vayehi means suffering, sorrow. Who is suffering? The Jews. The Jews went a long roundabout way, which eventually caused them a lot of suffering. Why is that so, says Hashem? It's not because of me. Eino mitzidi chalila, ki im mitzad Paro. It's all coming because of Paro. Ki vayehi Beshalach, vay haya Beshalach Paro, sheshilcham biyado mituv retzono. Paro actually sent the Jews with his entire heart at the time, because after all the plagues broke him down, and the last plague of the firstborns dying, Paro actually broke down, and he actually sent the Jews out. Not only that, says the Midrash this week, that he also actually accompanied the Jews out. He actually gave them a royal accompaniment out of Egypt, and he just didn't let them just go on their own. So that is one thing that caused the suffering. We're going to see how this ties in. And Shenit, another reason that of the suffering of the Jewish people is something to do with what? Beshalach Paro. Number one is the fact that Paro sent us out on his own will, and he even accompanies us out. And the second reason is et ha'am. Beshalach Paro et ha'am. What's the am? The Zohar tells us every time it says et ha'am, and in the same discussion, it uses a different way of describing the Jewish people, Bnei Israel, then we know that when it says ha'am, it's referring to the Erev Rav. They were the low part of the nation. You could say the simple, the basic people, just the am people. They weren't the Bnei Israel, the elevated, lofty people. So he says Moshe, Kizeh klal gadol nilmad michachmei haemet. This is something we learn from the secret, the Kabbalah. Shekol makom sheneemar am. If it says am in the Torah, or be'inyan atzmo omer Yisrael, and in the same discussion later on, it refers to the people as Yisrael. Says the Zohar, you should know she'elu erev rav elu Yisrael. The am is the erev rav, and the Bnei Israel is the real Jewish people. So now we know that why it starts off with ha'am, because we're talking about the reason why the Jewish people had to go through this long roundabout way. Because we have the am, because we have the Erev Rav. What does this have to do with anything? It says Ramoshe umimash shalach Erev Rav velo ikvam, because Parah sent the Erev Rav with them, and he let them leave. Ba'a ad Yisrael ra'a gdola. This caused the Jews a very bad thing. Why? Because the Erev Rav is with them, now they're going to see a war. If they wouldn't have waited 40 years, it's not because of the reasons we mentioned earlier, that the Egyptians will run after them and try to get them back to be slaves, try to get the items back. Hashem said, the Am will reconsider. Who's the Am? The Erev Rav. The Am will reconsider when they see a war. Because the Erev Rav have a weak level of emunah, because they aren't real Jews. He milchemet Plishtim. As we know that the Plishtim were very strong nemesis of the Jewish people, and this was going to happen. This is something that actually happened. The Gemara in Sanhedrin brings that 30 years prior to the Exodus, what part of the Shevet of Ephraim went to Israel before the Moshe Rabbeinu came, and they all got slaughtered. So this was like news that the Jewish people are not scared of the Palestinian threat of the Plishtim. So because of this, because the fact that we were scared that the Erev Rav are going to be afraid of the Plishtim, we're not scared that the Jews are going to be afraid. Why? Because the Jews have emunah. The Jews know that Hashem is going to take care of them. But the Erev Rav are going to be scared of any war that the children of Ephraim, just like the children of Ephraim, fell in battle, all of them, to the Palestinians. Now the Jews are scared. Now the Jews have to take the whole roundabout way because the Erev Rav is with them. If it would have been just the Jews, then the Jewish people wouldn't have had to go this long way. So now we have two reasons why the Jews had to take the long way. V'gam v'havai ha'acher hu sheshilcham paro ba'atzmo. Now the fact is that the Jews were sent away by Paro, and he accompanied them and led them out willingly. So now v'shavu Mitzrayim. Now they can return back to Egypt. Because if the Jews had have left Egypt against Paro's will, then they wouldn't really feel welcome to go back to Egypt. Egypt wouldn't be an automatic option of where to run to, because they wouldn't be welcomed there. There'd be arrest warrants out on them. But because Beshalach Paro et ha'am, because Paro sent the Jews out willingly, so now when they see a war, they can go back and feel that Paro is going to welcome them. If Paro hadn't sent them away and they would have escaped, they would be scared to run back there. Lest they be punished for the fact that they escaped. If your master actually let you go and he accompanied you out on your journey, he'll feel welcome to come back. When Paro let them go, because they didn't leave against his will, he eventually conceded to Hashem's will, or to begrudgingly. Oh, the Rabbatein Shamrusha Paro ayam alavel tamaderech. Not only did he let them go and he submitted, he actually led them out and went with them. Umarel em chibaya teira. He showed them extra fondness and love when he let them go. So now lo haya pachad sheyeshuv Mitzrayim. The Jewish people always have Mitzrayim as a option to go back to. Ki morat haleh al rasham pen yamiso v'darabam od alehem. If Paro wouldn't have let them out with such happiness and with the full consent, they wouldn't want to run back to Mitzrayim because they're scared of getting punished. They'll be given even more extreme work. But he'll never be able to go back. Right? It's like, I guess, if somebody escaped, Second World War Europe, there's no fear that he's going to run back there. Nobody's going back. But if somebody escaped America to come to Israel, if things get difficult here, financially or whatever, he misses the good old days in America, then chances are, he feels welcome back there. He'll just settle back into America. So the fact that the Jews didn't escape Egypt, they left, and they were essentially they were still welcome back, is another reason why the Jewish people, or really the Erev Rav, couldn't be taken on the fast route. So you thought, originally we presented another theory, a third reason of why we have to go through the Yam Suf and not Pelishtim, because we want to punish the Mitzrayim like for like and throw them all into the water, just like they did with the Jewish babies. Hashem could take the Jewish people where? Through the what? Through the Yam Suf. She'im lo ken. Why does he have to take them through the Yam Suf? There's another ocean he can take them, another sea, the Mediterranean Sea. There's a lot of beaches along the Palestinian coastline. But Yam Pelishtim shebimarav Mitzrayim v'derech Eretz Pelishtim. Ki lifnei hayamim olchim Kanada, as it's known to be a beach area. Ki shnei yamim hem. There's two beaches, there's two seas next to Egypt. There's the Red Sea and there's the Mediterranean Sea. Echad lemizracha hu Yam Suf, echad lemarava hu Yam Pelishtim. V'zeh amro v'yasev Elokim. So Hashem took the Jews around the Yam Suf, that meaning Hashem doesn't want to take them into the sea just to kill them. That's not the main reason, because he could have taken them, if the main reason he took them to the Yam Suf was just to punish them through water, he could have taken them through Pelishtim and punished them with the Mediterranean. So therefore this is not the reason. So what is the reason? Masha Amarti ki ha'am Erev Rav. The Erev Rav are the ones who are going to be afraid. Hem amutadim lashuv lo Yisrael. They're the ones that are going to run back because they don't have emunah. They don't trust that Hashem's got it figured out. How do we know that it's only the Erev Rav who are weak and scared of any facing war, because the Jewish people have weapons. The Jewish people are packing all kinds of different war arsenal. And therefore, if they were considering just backing out of any challenge and heading back home, they wouldn't come with war. They couldn't come with weapons, ready for a fight, ready to take on any challenge. They wouldn't have lots of weapons. The fear is only on the Am, the Erev Rav. Law al Bnei Israel, not referring to the real Jewish people. Now we're going to go also to reference the Midrash. The Midrash says, what does Chamushim mean? Only 20% or 2%, etc., or even 0.2% left. What does that have to do with the narrative here? Because even from the Jews, not all the Jews really had this level of emunah. Even the Jews themselves, 80% or even 98% of the Jews wouldn't have had this level of emunah, because it takes a lot of faith to head out into the unknown, being a slave people, and being ready to take on great nations and real battle scenarios with no prior training. But the Jewish people had emunah. How do I know? How does it make sense that an entire nation of people have emunah? Because you should know this is not the entire nation. This is only 20%. It's the cream of the crop of the Jewish people. The other 80% that weren't ready to face any challenge in the desert didn't want to leave, because they knew that the wars could happen, but they weren't ready to believe in Hashem and take on the world with Hashem's backing. So those people that weren't ready to become supernatural and to do the unimaginable, they actually perished in Choshech. Hashem said, you know what, if you're not ready, then you're not ready. That's it. I'm not going to force you to be ready. And that's why the pasuk is, again, the Rebbe Moshe explains, these are two reasons in the same word, referring to the fact that the entire issue here was the Am, the Erev Rav. They were the problem. But the Am Yisrael, they came with weapons because they have no fear. Because we're only talking about the top 20%, 2% of the people. And they were filtered out from the rest of the people who had weaker faith or no faith. The entire fear of going back in the face of war was only the Erev Rav, who have limited faith. They came out with only 10, 20%, only 2%. They are the real strong emunah. If it was only 2%, if it's 20% of the Jewish people, you could say 20% are people that have, their emunah, they have levels of emunah. But if it's only 2%, then these 2% of the entire people, we're talking about really, really the cream of the crop, like the proper people that have high levels of emunah. And that's why they won't go back. So this is an interesting pshat for Rav Moshe. It's not the pshat, I would say. It's not the pshat in the pasuk. It's as we know, Rav Moshe is a drush, because simply speaking, we see in the psukim that the Jewish people didn't have so much emunah, and it says Vayaminu b'Hashem u'Moshe avdo. At the Yam Suf, the Jewish people received more emunah, and we know also that the man was really an emunah booster. And as we know, today is Tuesday, Parashat Beshalach, which is the school of the Parashat Aman, and we see the Rabbeinu Bachai actually points out that the entire purpose of going into the desert was in order to have real life bitachon, emunah and bitachon. It was like a boot camp. It was like a bitachon boot camp. He says emunah is the theoretical level of belief. It's like you really, philosophizing about it, knowing the truth of it, even meditating about it, and really internalizing the truth of Hashem's ability and Hashem's omnipresence and omnipotence. But bitachon is when we're actually thrown into real life situations where we really need to throw ourselves onto Hashem and trust Him practically. And he says the Yam Suf was one example of that. And as the Midrash says, it wasn't just the fact that they trusted Hashem in the Yam Suf. He says because the Midrash says, it says in Tehillim that you split the sea into smithereens, into tiny crumbs. What does that mean? The Midrash says that the sea didn't just split the entire length of the sea forward. It split every step of the way. Every step in front of them was the depth of the ocean. They had to take a step, and it became dry land. Every step they took became dry land. So it's literally really an entire like life-changing stepping through Emunah and Bitachon. So that was a very powerful experience for them. And we know the man every day as well. They didn't have any savings. They couldn't even put away anything for the next day. They had to daily, literally just completely rely on Hashem, which really is the recipe of being a Jew on a deeper level, which is like the idea of prayer, that every day we believe that we have fresh shefa from Hashem. So that was actually the preparation of Torah. So we'll finish here for now, and we'll continue next time, which is now. Okay, I'm just gonna call my wife back for a second. Apologies. Hi, I'm just in the middle of Alshech. Is it something urgent, or can I just call you back soon? Okay, see you soon. Okay, everyone, back again. We are with the Holy Torah Musar and Kabalah, and today we're continuing the discussion of the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt and Paro's pursuit after them, and the fact that the Jewish people took a roundabout journey, etc. So the pasuk says, this is the third pasuk in the Parasha, Vayikach Moshe, Parashat Beshalach, Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo. He took the bones of Joseph. So it says Ramosha as follows, V'hine adayin hayam makom lomar. So last time we saw that it was only the Erev Rav that we were afraid that didn't have emunah. Really, the Jewish people would never be afraid of falling in battle because they have Hashem. And as long as they know that Hashem is with them, that Hashem is behind this, all of these things, then they're calm, they're confident, and they're ready to take on any challenge. Says Ramosha, but still, even if it's all Hashem, they're still worried that maybe this is the wrong thing to do. Why might it be the wrong thing to do? Shegam b'nei Yisrael ksherim v'mezuyanim yitnu lev lashuv. They might reconsider going back. B'rotam milchama, when they see war. Why? Not because they're scared of the weapons of the enemy, but rather they'll take it as a message from Hashem. Ki yomru v'yesh Hashem itanu. If Hashem is with us, v'lama matzatanu milchama. Why are we being faced with war if the Lord is with us? V'yomru b'libam. This will cause them to consider, ulai adayin lo nishlam hazman. Maybe the time for the Exodus hasn't come yet. Maybe the same fate of the Ephraimites who left early will happen to us. So that then they'll be afraid that what they're doing isn't the will of the Lord. Who says that this rationale of counting the 400 years starts from Yitzchak's birth? That sounds a bit, what should we say? It's not the pashat, it's not the pshat in the words of the Hashem to Avraham. So suddenly they'll start getting cold feet, and they'll start thinking, maybe we're taking the exile before the time. Maybe we're leaving the exile before the time, which is why we're going to be punished. And therefore, Al-Ken Amar HaKatuv Vayikach Moshe. Moshe took the bones of Yosef. For who? Why did he take the bones of Yosef? What does this have to do with the fact that the Jewish people won't be afraid of war? Ki lo haya pachad yaharu al Moshe lemor. Because essentially what they would say is, if they are starting to believe that the time hasn't yet come to leave, then they're basically going to start thinking that Moshe is an imposter. He's a fake Messiah. He's taking them out before the time. But because Moshe had the bones of Yosef, We don't think that the Jews are going to think that. The bones of Yosef are the strongest proof that the time has come and that Moshe is the actual Redeemer. Why? Ki al ken itchakem Moshe vayikach Moshe tatzmot Yosef imo. He took the bones leraya uleed, as a proof and as testimony. Ki hu hagoel amiti, that he is indeed the true Redeemer and Messiah. V'hu ki yishbiah b'nei Israel. So now we're going to see how this is a proof that the time has come. V'hu ki hinei Yosef b'tzavato techav. When Joseph took an oath, made his brothers take an oath to promising him to take them out. What does it say? It says, "Vayashba Yosef et bnei Israel limor." Joseph swore his brothers to say the following: "Pakod yifkod etchem v'aritem." So, what was really the content of Joseph's oath that he made them swear? Two things, says Moshe. Says Moshe, two things. What was the oath? The first oath was that he gave them over the oath that the Jewish people had, the tradition that the Jewish people had, which was that the Redeemer, that's going to be the real Redeemer, is going to take them out with the code Pakod Yifkod. Ki Kabalah Yad Yisrael Yaakov. The Jewish people had this tradition from Jacob. Ki HaGoel Sheyomar P'kida Kfula Hu HaGoel Amiti. If we have a Redeemer that announces the redemption by using this double-barreled Pakod Yifkod, that is the real Redeemer. V'zeh ki en tzafek ki masoret b'Yaakov lo tiyeh lanu ki al yedei Yosef. If this tradition came from Yaakov, who gave it over? Yosef, because Yosef was Yaakov's main student, his main continuer of the tradition. V'yitachen haya bazeh. So this tradition actually happened now at this oath of the bones. V'zeh amro vayashba Yosef et bnei Yisrael. What did Yosef make his brothers swear as an oath? Shnei dvarim. Lemor pakod yifkod. First of all, tell your children. Lemor means to tell over to others. What should they tell over? Tell to your children, and your children should tell their children. This is a tradition. That what? That pakod yifkod. That there's going to be a Redeemer that's going to come with this double-barreled expression of remembrance and redemption, and he's going to be the real Redeemer if nobody says it, then they're not the Redeemer. That's the oath number one. And oath number two, the second oath was that they should take his bones up to Eretz Israel. So now Ramosh will give us a very beautiful understanding of what really is the meaning, the deeper understanding of this Pakod Yifkod. What does that even mean? Why is this a double redemption? And why is this the code? And really, deep down, this comes back to the question of how do we know? Ramosh doesn't mention this, but this is a question that always bothered me, and the Mefarshim mention it on different levels. How could we know if this was a tradition in all the Jewish people's, every Jewish kid knew, as part of his tradition that he was taught, that the Redeemer is going to say Pakod Yifkod, then any imposter can just say the word Pakod Yifkod, and he's got the people running after him. So this Pakod Yifkod has got to be more than just these words. It's got to be more than just an empty phrase. So now Ramosh is going to take us to a little bit behind the scenes meaning of what Pakod Yifkod really means. So he says as follows: V'achshava, and I think this is a pshat, says Ramosh. Shehu ma'amarenu al pasuk va'otzeti et tzivutai et ami b'nei Yisrael. Hashem says, I'm going to take out my hosts, my nation, the Jewish people. Says Moshe, what does it mean, my host? What's sivotai? So the pshat means the Jewish people, the hosts of the Jewish people, the many hundreds of thousands of Jews. But says Moshe, the deeper meaning of that is Hinei mashkon yesh Yisrael shotzia magalut. He was telling the Jewish people, you should know that you're for sure going to leave Egypt. Why? Ki alo pamalya shel ma'ala hem begalut im Israel. When the Jews are in exile, the entire heavenly pamalya, the heavenly family, the family Shel Ma'ala is also in exile. So we're talking about the heavens and all the angels are with the Shechina in Galut. As we know that Am Yisrael are in Galut, the Shechina comes to Galut with us. So therefore, V'ani lo anichem, the heavenly angels and the Shechina will definitely not remain in Galut. Umi sheyotzi otam, yotzi et Yisrael. So the Jewish people had a guarantee that because Hashem is always going to make sure that the Malachim and the Shechina will leave Mitzrayim, So once they're leaving, then the Jewish people can leave as well. And obviously, even though the Jewish people are human, and the Jewish people can sin and fall into the Egyptian culture and the Egyptian idols, and therefore be unworthy of leaving, as the situation was, but because Hashem tied the state of the Shekhinah and the heavenly chariots and the Pamalia Shalmala to the Jewish people, that was their guarantee, because they tethered them, Hashem tethered them with the Shekhinah, that they're definitely going to leave. Because that's the Hashem's not going to, meaning Hashem was saying that when the Jews are in Galut, I'm in Galut. And I can't stay in Galut because the story Hashem is always going to be good. So eventually the Jewish people's story is also going to end good. I'm going to take out who? My hosts, my angels. The Agaban, and by the way, they'll also come along. This is the deeper meaning when Yosef says, Pakod yifkod. Remember, he will remember. What does that mean? Pakod et elyonim, yifkod et tachtanim. Hashem will surely remember the heavenly angels and Shechina Kedosha, and therefore yifkod tachtanim. He'll also remember the Jewish people along with that. But now that will explain to us, once we understand that the redemption of the Jewish people is dependent on the redemption of the Shekhinah. Now we understand how Moshe taking the bones of Yosef is a proof that the time has indeed come. What is the proof? How is this a proof backing up Moshe's claim that he's an actual real Redeemer? Because Hashbeah, now Moshe is answering why it says double term for the oath that Yosef made, because Yosef actually made two oaths. What was the first oath? Pakod yifkod. That what? That Hashem is going to take the Jews out along with the Shekhinah, and that's going to be your coat, that's going to be your guarantee that you're going to leave, and it's also going to be the sign that nobody can claim that the time has come. If the Shekhinah is not leaving, then you're not leaving. It goes both ways. So if some fake Messiah comes and says, oh, we're leaving now, but you can see that the Shekhinah is still in Galut, that's a sign that you're not really left, that the Galut hasn't ended. But then when Moshe came, he said, Ko Amar Hashem. This is what Hashem said, Pakod Pakadati. I double remembered, which means I remembered the Shekhinah and I remembered the Jews. And therefore, Vahalitem, Yosef said, then you can take my bones. You can only take my bones when this double Shekhinah redemption happens. If the Jews will be skeptical regarding the authenticity of Moshe's mission to take them out. Imamitihu, whether it's the actual time to leave or not, or not. All they have to do is see that Yosef's coffin is with Moshe, and that itself is the clearest sign possible that the time has come. And they'll agree and acknowledge Moshe's redemption mission. Where do we see this even more? Moshe, when he tried to find the coffin of Yosef, he couldn't find it. He was looking around everywhere, and it was hidden. Says the Midrash, Amralo Serach bat Asher, Serach the son of Asher, who was still alive, said, Ki haya bekarbanit shel malachim. He was buried in the pyramids with all the kings, all the pharaohs. V'halach umatza aronot rabim. He went into the burial tomb and he found a bunch of different coffins. He didn't know which one was Joseph's. V'lo yadat Yosef. As Amar, what did he say? He said, Yosef, Yosef. What were the words he said? Hinei hashchina, the Shechina, Knesset Israel, the entirety of the Jewish people's collective soul. Upamalia Shalmala, and the heavenly family. V'Yisrael, and the Jewish people, Yotzim, are leaving now. Lama ki higia et geula, the time of redemption has happened. Im titgale mutav, if you're going to reveal yourself to us, then we're happy to take you. V'im lav, if we don't know where you are, p'turin anu me'ashvua, we're going to be exempted from the oath. Miyad nizdazeh arono, Yosef's coffin shook, vibrated, v'netalo, knew it was his and he took it. So now, says Rav Moshe, the fact that Yosef was hidden until the time came this is an actual proof that Yosef, that the time has come. Ki hinei luleisha amar lo. And what was really what Moshe said to Yosef? He told him the Shechina is leaving, Pamalia Shel Ma'ala is leaving, and the Jews are leaving. Which, in other words, he was saying Pakod Yifkod to Yosef. He was telling Yosef that this Pakod Yifkod you spoke about is happening now, and that was the time when he said this is happening. Yosef revealed himself. Lo haya mitra'eh mamtzi atzmo sheikhu. If not that this was actually the time of this double remembrance, he wouldn't reveal himself. Ki nafsho b'shamayim yodat ma'od. Joseph is already in heaven and he knows the truth. So the fact that Joseph revealed himself is a proof that this double-barreled remembrance is happening, and the Shekhinah has left, and Moshe is in here to take us out. Umagam says Moshe, this is even more backed up by the Zohar. What does the Zohar say? Zohar says, Ki Yosef haya merkava le Shekhinah b'Mitzrayim. Yosef was, at least after Yaakov died, or even before Yaakov came, Yosef was the chariot of the Shekhinah. That as long as the Shekhinah was in Mitzrayim, Yosef had to be there to be the tzaddik that was present in order to allow the Shekhinah to be there with the Jewish people, because the Shekhinah always needs to rest on the tzaddik's soul. So even when Joseph died, his kever, his coffin in Mitzrayim, was a resting place for the Shekhinah, as we know that Yosef is the midat of Yisod, which is the connection to the Shekhinah, and if the Shekhinah would still remain in Mitzrayim, Yosef wouldn't be able to leave, because Yosef has to stay in Mitzrayim as long as the Shekhinah is there. So the fact that Yosef is coming out is the biggest proof that the Shekhinah is coming out, which is the biggest proof of the Jews' time to come out as well. Nimtza ki bazot she'imtzi atzmo ra'aya leMoshe שגאולו אמיתית, וזה ויקח משה את עצמות יוסף עמו. לראיה, Moshe took the bones of Yosef. Why did he take the bones? To prove that it's the time to go. Ve'ech yaraya, how is Yosef's bones being with Moshe a proof that the time has come? Ki Yosef anizkar hashbia ishbia, because Yosef made the double oath. Number one, sheyamru pakod yifkod, which means that Moshe using this word Pakod Yifkod is the real redemption, real redeemer, Hu HaGoel Amiti. Number two, the second oath that Yosef made, Yosef also made a second oath, the time when that is going to be the double remembrance, the double redemption, of the holy angels in heaven. Beshalach Israel, as varitem. Now only then am I going to allow you to take me up. Yosef revealed himself to Moshe to be able to take him. This is the clearest sign. The time has come. Yosef would not reveal himself otherwise. This is a beautiful diuk, as we mentioned before, that Moshe, in order to get Yosef to reveal himself to him in the pyramids, in the burial spot of the Egyptian pharaohs, he actually used the statement of the Shekhinah and the Pamalia Shel Ma'ala are leaving, and that's what got Yosef to vibrate and reveal himself to be taken out. So this is really coming back to the question. Moshe doesn't really finish off the point, but this is what Moshe was saying before. How does this fit in here? Because we need to explain why. How do we know that the Jewish people were ready to face any challenge? Any war wasn't going to make them want to turn back and back out of the whole thing. Only the Erev Rav. So he says why? Because the Jewish people had emunah. But he says even if you have emunah, hafuch, if you have emunah, that will make you believe that if this is Hashem's plan, then nothing should go wrong. If something's going wrong, that must be it's not Hashem's plan. And they even have precedent to that. They had precedent to that with the Ephraim people that left 30 years earlier when it wasn't the time, and they went through the Pelishtim and they got killed. So that could have been a very strong deterrent. Whenever they see any hint of war, that will be like, oh, okay, war shouldn't happen to those who are doing Hashem's will. So, and we're not 100% sure it's Hashem's will to begin with, then maybe let's go back to Mitzrayim, because that's what Hashem wants from us to do. They were going to be like the the Torah Karta of like, it's not the time to leave. We have to go back to, we have to leave the state. So that's why the fact that Moshe had the bones was the clearest proof that it is the time, and therefore the Jews would not have backed out of the war. It was only the Erev Rav, and they're the ones that caused all of the problems. Grab the water. Okay, so now we're continuing the next pasuk in the Parasha. Vayis'u Sukkot. They journeyed from Sukkot, which was the first stop out of Egypt. Vayachnu be'etam. And they landed, they rested in Etam. Where's Etam? B'ktsei HaMidbar, which is the edge of the desert. Says Rav Moshe, we need to understand, why do I need to know where Etam is? We know where Etam is, or we don't know where Etam is. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. What's the significance of Etam being at the edge of the desert? Number 2, another thing that's mentioned here, says Rav Moshe, in this rhetoric of the Jewish people leaving the desert and heading back in the whole lead up to Paro's pursuit, is the mention of the fact that they had the clouds of glory. Now, why didn't we mention that also last week's parasha? There seems to be certain details that are not important to the actual story of the Exodus. The fact that that Moshe took the bones, that they had clouds of glory. So all of these things seem to be left out in the main story of the Exodus, and they're now being reintroduced or introduced at a later date, as a later stage in the story, and they seem to have significance specifically to this part of the story. So why is that so? Number 3, the pasuk says that they had a cloud, a cloud pillar during the day, and then they had a pillar of fire during the night. And the pasuk finishes off, they had the fire pillar during the night, lalechet yomam v'layla, to go day and night. But this is interesting, because why they didn't have the fire pillar to go during the day? During the day they didn't need the fire pillar, so the fire pillar was to go at night. V'lama mazkir midat yom balayla. It should say there was a amud esh, a pillar of fire, lalechet balayla, to enable them to walk during the night too. The yomam v'layla isn't really to do anything with the fire. Ve'im amro yomam chozer al amud hanizkar. So you want to tell me that when the pasuk finishes off, so they should go during the day and during the night, it's not referring to only the fire pillar. It's also referring to the cloud pillar. So the cloud pillar is for the day and the fire pillar is during the night. But says Rav Moshe, it already says that the cloud pillar is for the daytime. So we see there's some kind of dayness mentioned at the fire pillar. Number 4, we have to understand. So the rabbis explain that lo yamish means that the fire pillar and the cloud pillar always they were there always. They made sure nobody was the Jews were left without any of them. So when they had the changing of the guards, they were both there at the same time. And then one would leave to make place for the other. But the question is, why does it only mention the fact that the cloud didn't leave until the fire pillar came, and not the other way around? It only mentions it one of the ways. V'gam ma she'amru rabbeinu shelo haya noseh amud ha'anam lefneim ad achrei hayot amud ha'esh lefneim. Ech numad ze ma'pasuk. How is this clear in the pasuk? How does it say it here? Says Rav Moshe as follows. Ach, lema shegazra chokhmato yitbarach. So now we have an interesting situation here. The Jews have headed out to the desert, and they just reached the desert, on the outskirts of the desert in Etam, and suddenly they're turning back. Now, what's going on? Why are they turning back? So we have to understand that this was obviously a ruse to get Paro to start feeling like the Jews are confused, as we know. But we have to understand how that had an effect on the Jewish people as well, because they were told that they're going to leave, and now they're being told to go back. So this was a real test of character for anybody involved with this whole event. So it says Rav Moshe as follows. So obviously the main point of turning back was Sheyomru ki Yisrael nevuchim. So in order to confuse Paro, to make him make the mistake of running after them, v'yitbu bayam, so they can drown in the sea. V'hinei chash pen yomar ish. One could claim the following: Ma betza bezeh sheyashuv achor malach yom echad. What's the benefit of the Jews going back one day journey? Pente tzetakala. It can actually cause damage. What would be the problem? Ki yimtzu makom Yisrael ha'hav lomao. The Jews might think that Moshe isn't acting on the Lord's command, because really they didn't know if Moshe spoke to Hashem or not. All they saw was Moshe's commands. They don't know yet. They didn't yet know Moshe so well. So far, they're just being carried around and they're getting to know this whole new system. And suddenly, as long as things make sense, they're with the plan. They're like, okay, we're leaving. Okay, I get that. I'm prepared to take this journey into the unknown. But let's go. And suddenly Moshe is like, no. We got to the edge of the desert. We're going to turn around now. What's going on? Why are they turning around? Says, what will be the reason that the Jews might think that Moshe is doing it on his own? Mi yurato, because Moshe is afraid. Moshe just had a good look at the desert. And what does he see there? Empty vastness. The only thing that's there are huge venomous snakes. And Moshe was like, uh-oh, this is not the plan. I didn't think this through. I thought we can escape through the desert. The desert's full of snakes. Let's go back. And the Jewish people will start thinking that Moshe doesn't have it together. He's confused. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's suddenly just got cold feet. They got to the edge of the desert, and Moshe is telling them to go back. Why? Because of the snakes. Because they're scared of the snakes. This is why he's telling them to go back. So he can now reconsider and recalculate his plans to find a different way out of Egypt. Or another thing they could think about. The reason Moshe is telling them to turn back is because they reached the desert during the night. And it's not good to start such a dangerous, perilous journey during the nighttime, as we know that the nighttime is a time of destructive forces. So Moshe is like, okay, let's back off for a minute. Let's stay away from the desert for now, and we'll get back here during the daytime. So mamtin ad odor boke or ad et boam mudaesh. So it could be two things. It could be that Moshe will wait till the morning, because the pillar of fire isn't enough to head out into the desert with, or maybe the pillar of fire is good enough to head into the desert with, but it didn't yet arrive. They were waiting for the pillar of fire to arrive after the pillar of cloud of glory had left. So right now they had to hang in there until help arrives. So now we want to make sure that the Jewish people believe Moshe, because Moshe obviously told them that this is the plan. We're going back so that Paro should think that we're lost and he should start running after us. But they're like, okay, this sounds like outlandish plan. I don't know if you're making this up, if you're telling us this is what Hashem said. And they could start questioning Moshe. Va'adru atam ha'emet, until they see that Paro actually chased them and Paro actually got killed and all the Egyptians got thrown into the sea. It will take them a couple of days of questioning Moshe, questioning the whole thing, and that wouldn't be good for them. So that's why Hashem wanted to straight away make sure that they don't have these thoughts, they don't have these sveikot in Moshe Rabbeinu's authenticity, that he's giving Hashem's orders. So what's going on here? So how do we understand the psukim? V'zeh inyan haktuvim. V'yachnu be'etam b'ktzei hamidbar. They rested in Eitam. Asher chanaya zu hayta al pi Hashem. They rested there because Hashem said. Why did Hashem tell them to go to the edge of the desert and then turn back? L'sheyiyeh makom lahatot Paro. It was in order to make Paro, to mislead him and make him think that they're lost, they're confused. That Paro should think that they're afraid of the desert. They turned back because of the fearsome. They were scared of the fearsome snakes. Now is our opportunity to strike. The Jews are scared. That means that God isn't with them. So now we can attack. Because now the Jews are helpless. They've left their divine protection. Okay, so you've got a nice bait. You're getting Paro to chase them. That's very good. But what's going to happen here is that the Jewish people are also going to be involved in this, and they're going to really, really freak out, and they're going to start questioning Moshe's authenticity. Now we're mentioning the story of the clouds of glory. Why is that so? How does the clouds of glory help the Jews not question Moshe? This is going to help the Jews not question Moshe's motives. How? But to understand how this is going to help the Jews believe in Moshe, it says that the Jews had a pillar of cloud, lan chotam haderech. So the simple translation means to show them the way, to lead them on the way. But there, if that's true, it should have said lan chotam lachnotam baderech. It should have said that to lead them in the way. But what does it say? It says lan chotam haderech, to lead, to straighten the path. What does that mean? That means that when they reach the edge of the desert, and now they're turning back, which you could say the reason is because they're afraid of all of these crazy snakes in the desert. Lo me'eimat nachash saraf. It's not because of the snakes that Moshe was scared of, that's why they're backing out and turning around. Why do I know for sure it's not because of that? Hashem is heading in front of them, not only to show them the way to go, to remove any obstacles on the way, to destroy any of the negative snakes, to smooth out the paths. As the Midrash says, that the valleys were lifted, the mountain dunes were flattened. So the Jews had to just go walk straight, and there was no dangerous predators. Right, as we know, there were 7 clouds, 6 from all directions, four directions up and down, and the 7th was the one that went in front of them. The Midrash says it flattened the hills and lifted the valleys, and it would kill and remove all of the snakes and scorpions, and it would literally roll out a red carpet, so to speak, of scorpion and snake blood in front of them, so that they don't have to face any of the dangers of the desert. So now, and this is what the pasuk means, lan chotam haderech, to flatten out, to the straight, the actual, to straighten out the derech. Actually, the cloud was making the derech. It was making it possible. It was creating a path through the desert that was sterile from all of the dangers of the desert. Even though Paro can be fooled and misled into thinking that the Jews are afraid of the elements of the desert, but the Jews themselves, they know that's not the reason. They know Moshe isn't scared of the desert. Why? Because they have the clouds, which is why Moshe explains, this is why we're mentioning the clouds of glory here, because it's explaining the methods that Hashem is using and how it's protecting the Jewish people but misleading Paro at the same time. Another reason we would say that Moshe is backing out of the desert is because he doesn't want to head in during the night time. You don't want to head into a dangerous zone during the night, because any journey shouldn't be taken during the night, as the Gemara mentions. But that's not true either. Why? Because besides the cloud of glory during the day, there's a pillar of fire in the night time. And what does the pillar of fire, the pillar of fire do? Be'amud esh laha'ir lahem. It lights up the entire camp. Kol kach be'etzem. It makes the night so bright. Lalechet yomam v'layla. It makes the night be shining like the daytime. Klomar halayla kayom mamash. It wasn't just a little spotlight so far away somewhere. It was a real, like, massive floodlights just flooding the entire camp with light. Alken izkir po yomam lashvot lo halayla, to say that the night and the day were the same, almost like the cities we live in today. It's not like an entire huge population that have a small lantern in front of them trying to light it up, because that won't help. It won't actually make things light. Only the few people in the front, very close to the lantern. And that wasn't that way. It was actually so light. It was as if they're walking during the daytime. The entire camp was lit up. That all of them had light. It caused the night to be like the day. Which is interesting, actually, because we know that the desert is a place of all the negative forces, not only physically but also spiritually, which is why the Jewish people in the desert had to go through all of these different journeys, and they had to journey and camp and rest and journey, and all the things that happened, all of the crazy downfalls and the tests that they went through, because they were actually dealing with very, very intense opposition forces to Hashem. And as we know, the Zohar calls the three negative klipas that are opposing Hashem's energy Nachash, Saharaf, and Akrab, the three different types of venomous reptiles that hang out in the desert. So the Ananya Kavod was actually the spiritual bubble as well as the physical bubble, creating a godly, fertile environment in the desert. It was almost like they were traveling with like a space rocket in outer space with all kinds of different oxygen masks spiritually, and also the fact that nighttime, which is also a time of darkness, was actually made into night. Night was like day, and that's another indication of the spiritual level of the Jews in the desert, that they had this ability to transform every type of darkness and negative force into holiness, which is really what the journey of the Jewish people in the desert was. So that's what Moshe is telling us here, is another reason why we know that Moshe isn't backing out of this journey out of fear of the night. And another reason why he didn't wait around for the pillar of fire to come, because the pillar of fire always comes straight away before the end of the day. Before the pillar of cloud of honor leaves, the cloud of glory leaves, the pillar of fire would come. It doesn't come be that Moshe is waiting for it to come. But I'm looking at Pasuk because it says, it says that the pillar of fire wouldn't leave from before the people, but it doesn't say that. It says, Lo yamush amud aman yomam lifnei ha'am v'amud ha'esh laila lifnei ha'am, that the pillar of cloud glory wouldn't leave until the amud ha'esh is lifnei ha'am. So now, coming back to our story, Moshe didn't leave the desert because of fear of the nighttime, because it was light like the daytime. So obviously that's not the reason to be scared. So therefore, what was the only reason? The reason was for Paro to think that they're too scared to head out in the desert. They went back from the desert, an entire day's length of journeying, turning around. Yomar Paro ba'ad b'nei Yisrael, he said about the Jewish people, Nevuchim en ba'aretz, they're confused. Ki, why are they confused? V'nuzara ki sagar aleim midbar. The midbar is locked in front of them. They can't penetrate it. Why can't they penetrate it? Ki karvu nechashim v'sarfei midbar. The flaming snakes and scary venomous animals are standing against them in the desert. V'nisgar midbar v'adam, and therefore they can't enter it. Lebilti uchala kanesbo. So Paro was like, hey, they thought they can escape through the desert. Now they're realizing the desert isn't the place to go through. The desert is an uninhabitable place. And if it's uninhabitable, it's also impassable. And the Jews were scared. So the Paro says, okay, now let's chase them. Interestingly enough, the Malbim adds that, as we know, Rashi brings, that Baal Tzefon was the only Avodah Zarah that Hashem didn't destroy during the firstborn plague. And that was so the Mitzrayim can think that, oh, this Avodah Zarah is actually a powerful one, that the Jews, God of the Hebrews, can't overpower him. So Paro was actually thinking now as well that the Jews, where did they go back to camp? The pasuk says they went back where? They camped in front of the sea by Migdal, Lifnei Baal Tzefon. They camped in front of this Baal Tzefon. So Hashem was telling the Jews to create this stage to look like that the Baal Tzefon actually pulled the Jews out of their journey, kind of hacked the Jew system, and made them unwillingly turn back, and now they're being held hostage by Baal Tzefon. And he was the one, Sagar Aleim Midbar, but meaning Baal Tzefon doesn't let them into the desert. So now Paro's thinking, hey, I forgot about Baal Tzefon. He was like a side of a desire that we had in the desert. We didn't really focus on him. But now I'm realizing that he's actually a very strong God. He's even managing to overcome the God of the Hebrews. Yud Kei Vav Kei, he didn't even manage to destroy him at the firstborn plague like all the other gods. And now he's actually managing to bring the Jews back from the desert. And he's keeping them there for me to come and attack them. So Paro really took the opportunity in his head. This was actually a golden opportunity to realize that he was like, yeah, Hashem dropped them. So now Ramosh is going to explain why the Jewish people is obviously, that wasn't the case that Hashem left them behind, but why Paro did think so. So now he says as follows: V'hinei lu chachmu Paro v'avadav. If Paro and his servants were actually smart, they wouldn't try and chase the Jews in an aggressive manner, trying to kill them. They could have done a way better plan. They could have gone over to the Jews and lovingly and caringly said to them, look, you've got one option, which is the option of going through the desert now with all these snakes and scorpions. It's very dangerous. It's going to be very difficult. You've got no water or food. But I'm going to offer you a very secure haven back in Egypt. And it's going to be fine. We're not going to punish you for it. We're going to bring you back. And we're going to offer you nice smartphones and easy jobs. And you're just going to be a slave. It's fine. It's easy. It's comfortable. Right? And that could have been the emancipation version of destroying the Jews, of letting the Jews feel comfortable to come back into Egypt. But what did Hashem do? Hashem made the Egyptians not give them the nice pitch, as the only option they have rationally is to be back in Egypt, and they'll welcome them with open arms. What did Hashem do? Hashem actually v'chizakti et lev Paro. Hashem made Paro's heart heavy and hardened, b'chamat kocho, with anger. L'man yitzchazku Yisrael itametz bilti tet lev lashuv elav. So the Jewish people shouldn't even for 1 minute think that going back to Egypt is an option. So even though we see that some of the people were telling Moshe, oh, why do we leave Egypt? I would love to be back in Egypt. But they knew obviously that's not an option now. They were angry at Moshe for taking away that option. They were like, we were very comfortable there, and now you've made us be a Paro. We're an enemy of the state now. Now we don't have a state to go back to. We're a stateless people. We're now stuck in front of a sea. What do? And this is where the Jews really had to access their emunah in order to break free and bring forth the miracle. So now we're going to skip the 16 questions of the next piece because we have only a few minutes left, and we're going to get straight onto what Rav Moshe tells us here. So Amar and Kivarati Israel Shavim Alachem Echad. Parasha said the reason the Jews left, the reason the Jews are returning back to Egypt is because of the scary snakes, which is why they're afraid, they're running away. Vayugad lemelech Mitzrayim. It was told to the king of Egypt, Ki barach ha'am. That the Jews escaped. What does it mean that the Jews escaped? It doesn't mean that they escaped Egypt, because originally they left Egypt with Pharaoh's consent. But barach ha'am, says Ramosha, means they escaped the desert because they were scared. They were scared of all the elements there. And then vayehafach levav Paro. Paro said as follows: why did Hashem punish me with all the 10 plagues? I've got two ways of understanding it. Either because I didn't acknowledge Hashem's power. I said, Lo yadati yud yudke vavke. I don't acknowledge yudke vavke. Or because I actually held the Jews hostage. So what did Hashem do? Hashem constantly sent messages, let my people go. Shalach et ami, let my people. So Hashem was basically saying that the only thing I care about, I don't care about you acknowledging me, not acknowledging me. That doesn't really make a difference to me. What I care about, Hashem says, is my people. So Paro said, okay, I'll let your people go. But the second, says Paro, Moshe explains, he saw that the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt and that Hashem just abandoned them. So Paro said, no, listen here, what just happened? Hashem wanted to punish me because I disrespected him, but he didn't have the guts to say that he was punishing me because of that, because he was too proud to admit that I offended him. So he made as if the plagues were coming to take the Jews out of Egypt, but now once he's given me those plagues, he took the Jews out and just abandoned them to their fate in the desert. So suddenly he realized that, hey, I don't have to actually care about the Jews. I can go and kill the Jews because Hashem doesn't care about them either. I just need to figure out with Hashem. We'll figure out without. I'll apologize. So suddenly the fact that he felt that the Jews were abandoned by Hashem gave him his power or his perceived mistake, that he can now run after the Jews because Hashem isn't really with them. And obviously that was his mistake because Hashem was always with us. May we merit to have Hashem with us all the time. Thank you, Hashem.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for watching, everyone. Yom Tov.